Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel, and this video obviously will continue doing the videos on feminism. However, I just came across this video and decided that I wanted to debunk some of the proofs. Apparently Earth is not a spinning ball. Another flat earther. I'm not going to just flat out say they're flat out. Anyway, I'm not just going to claim anything about them before we watch the video. However, I have to say that this is not the only types of video I'll be doing. I won't just be doing reactions and analysing. I'll also be doing some gaming videos and possibly some podcasts with friends reacting to some videos like this. So yeah, let's. I'm not gonna put it on full. I've got some stupid virus going on or whatever. Right, let's begin.
200 Proofs Earth is Not a Spinning Ball by Eric Dubay. 1. The horizon always appears perfectly flat 360 degrees around the observer regardless of altitude.
Okay, so this first one is a bit ridiculous, I have to say. Going on a weather balloon and going to a specific height, the heights that you go to aren't actually high enough to see the Earth. Like, I feel like these flat earthers don't actually understand the scale of the Earth itself. So if you go in a little weather balloon, you're not gonna see, the curved ball. But if you go in the ISS, for example, you are, and it's pretty obvious.
All amateur balloon, rocket, plane, and drone footage show a completely flat horizon over 20.
Exactly, amateur. They don't go as high as the professional ones, and they aren't designed to. The uses, they're like modules, say. They're not made by people who know how to put it into the high altitudes that you're able to see the curve of the Earth.
Plus miles high. Only NASA and other government space agencies show curvature in their fake CGI photos and videos.
Okay, so this is a random claim made here. I feel like every video you just like NASA and these space organizations, massive conspiracy, they're hiding all this stuff from us. They're really not. Like, even if the ISS wasn't there, doesn't prove your point by saying that an amateur rocket or an amateur drone or weather balloon doesn't go high enough to see the curvature of the Earth. I feel like this is just flat out, really hypocrisy here, because you state to have the evidence for it, and you have video evidence, but then whenever an organisation that does prove the Earth is actually a spinning ball, and they have video evidence, you're a hypocrite in that way because you don't take what they're videoing seriously, so why should we take what you're videoing seriously?
2. The horizon always rises to the eye level of the observer as altitude is gained.
Not necessarily. If you're going to use this as an example with maybe a plane doesn't go high enough. I don't think I should have to get a diagram out here, but I don't think a plane doesn't go high enough to see the entire Earth's curvature. Uh, it seems here that you're having a bit of a delusion because you don't understand the scale of the Earth.
So you never have to look down to see it. If Earth were in fact a globe, no matter how large, as you ascended, the horizon would stay fixed and the observer would have to tilt looking down further and further to see it.
Not necessarily. On a flat Earth, you'd have to look down to see the horizon, because if it's a flat Earth, the horizon will always be beneath you. On a curved Earth, when you go up, the horizon would curve down at a certain altitude, and that altitude isn't sufficient on a plane or somewhere where an observer is, except the only places where they go high enough you claim to be some sort of government conspiracy.
3. The natural physics of water is to find and maintain its level. If Earth were a giant sphere tilted, wobbling, and hurtling through infinite space, then truly flat, consistently level surfaces would not exist here.
Okay, so there's two things to say about this. Firstly, water is curved. You're gonna take the Bedford River experiment, for example. The first time atmospheric refraction and other stuff that goes into it wasn't taken in account, and really, the next time they actually did the Bedford level experiment with the right conditions and the right experimental materials, it proved that the water was curved. And secondly, some planes of water may be flat for a certain amount of distance. Again, you're not really taking into account that the Earth is absolutely gigantic.
But since Earth is in fact an extended flat plane, this fundamental physical property of fluids finding and remaining level is consistent with experience.
Well, you're not proving it, you're not giving it, there's no proof here. It says 200 proofs, but you're not backing with it any evidence. You're just making spin-off claims from other videos where there's literally no content at all, and it's just completely bland.
And common sense. 4.
Okay, so you claim for everything that you say it's just common sense, just commonsensical. It's not really. It's more common sense to take real evidence and make observations based on observations that were in the right conditions. And we, for example, in space, use infrared cameras to see through clouds. We haven't just put some magic CGI filter on the infrared cameras. Oh, that's not just common sense, is it? You can't make some outlandish claim and then say it's commonsensical. God's sake.
Rivers run down to sea level, finding the easiest course, north, south, east, west, and all other intermediary directions over the Earth at the same time. If Earth were truly a spinning ball, then many of these rivers would be impossibly flowing uphill. For example, the Mississippi, in its 3,000 miles, would have to ascend 11 miles before reaching the Gulf of Mexico.
Not exactly. Maybe you are right in a sense, but you're not right in saying that the Earth is flat because of this. You're even saying that the Mississippi River is 3,000 miles long. You do realise that because of gravity, it brings you to the centre of a mass. It doesn't bring you to the mass, it brings you to the central point of the mass, wherever that is. Everything would seem as flat on the surface is because you're always based upon the central point of mass. So you're not going to experience the Earth's hilliness in your example, the river, because the river stays to the central point of mass. So on a apparently flat plane on Earth, if there was a completely flat land, as you say, based on Earth outside, of course it's like a hill, but you don't experience that because you're always relative to the central point of mass. For a hill, on an actual hill, for example, it's coming out of the ground, and you're based on its central point of mass. So it depends, like where the central point of mass is.
5. One portion of the Nile River flows for 1,000 miles with a fall of only 1 foot. Parts of the West African Congo, according to the supposed inclination and movement of the ball earth, would be sometimes running uphill and sometimes down. This would also be the case for the Parana, Paraguay, and other long rivers.
Okay, so by saying that a river Nile is 1,000, you said it's a strait is 1,000 miles long. If you're gonna say that you can see something from that long away, on a ball earth, it's gonna be always underneath the horizon unless there is extra effects going on there. Like every flat earth video I see, they fail to take into account of atmospheric refraction, where the light is spread out. So for example, if you see a shadow and you've got separate lights, you'll see multiple shadows because the light's falling upon in different places. So because of another example I can give is ice in the Antarctic or the Arctic. Now, the reason they are as cold as they are is because the light and the heat refracts off the ice. It reflects off the ice and goes back into the atmosphere. So this is the same for water, and this is the same for the atmosphere. That certain light refractions can cause these anomalies and effects.
6. If Earth were a ball 25,000 miles in circumference, as NASA and modern astronomy claim,
Okay, so you're saying NASA and modern astronomy claim. NASA and modern astronomy have observed this. They don't just go and say, okay, the Earth is a ball, we don't have any evidence. No, that's what you're doing here. What they do is they send up satellites that go high enough to observe the curvature, and they also, if you haven't realised before, they have probes that they send outside into the outer solar system, and even have one going into the Orion cloud. Now, if they didn't have that, they would have no evidence other than one experiment, which was, I don't remember the exact name for the experiment, but there's 3 sticks, and the way that the light bounced off proved that there was some form of curvature. And you know, you're not really saying why it's just a claim. They have evidence for it. You're not giving any evidence except for the fact that it's just common sense.
Spherical trigonometry dictates the surface of all standing water must curve downward an easily measurable 8 inches per mile, multiplied by the square of the distance. This means along a 6-mile channel of standing water, the Earth would dip 6 feet on either end from the central peak. Every time such experiments have been conducted, however, standing water has proven to be perfectly level.
Not exactly. Like I said again, atmospheric refraction. There's other factors than just the curvature. It's quite obvious that you're not really researching this. You're just going, oh, I can't see it with my eyes, therefore that everything that I observe with my eyes is true. So let's say, for an example, you've had a drug and it's making you trip out. Is what you're seeing is real? Is what you see in a dream real? Not necessarily. Just like if you're standing on a massive ball Earth, if an insect was standing, for say, on a massive balloon, it would act as if it was flat. It's because the surface area is massive, just like the Earth. You don't seem to understand this, as well as you don't seem to understand other factors that go into this.
7. Surveyors, engineers, and architects are never required to factor the supposed curvature of the Earth into their projects.
Yes, because when they're building the bridges, etc., the buildings and structures are going to be relative to the central point of mass, and there are some buildings and structures and bridges where they do have to take this into account. And I think there's other videos that show this, but there's ones where the Earth actually dips more, because the Earth isn't completely a perfect sphere ball. It's more like an oblate spheroid, and it's not really a pear, but it's a bad analogy to say that, but it just dips on the edge, and there's some like parts where the inside, where there's less gravity pointed towards the central point of mass, or there's more masses being pulling towards, or not enough masses pulling at the sea levels. So in most of these cases where you're saying this, it's probably just that the buildings and structures are still relative to the central point of mass.
Canals, railways, bridges, and tunnels, for example, are always cut and laid horizontally, often over hundreds of miles without any allowance for curvature.
Like I said again, you can see, look, with my mouse cursor here, the structures that actually go into the ground pretty much permits them to a central point of mass. You can see if you go into the background, obviously perspective makes you see everything go into like a tiny thing here, but it does still curve down into an edge. Now, it does curve down in this way because obviously the structures are relative to the central point of mass. So these things that's holding it up is attached to Earth. So Earth has the gravitational effect on these structures.
8. The Suez Canal, connecting the Mediterranean with the Red Sea, is 100 miles long without any locks, making the water an uninterrupted continuation of the two seas. When constructed, the Earth's supposed curvature was not taken into account. It was dug along a horizontal datum line, 26 feet below sea level, passing through several lakes from one sea to the other, with the datum line and the water's surface running perfectly parallel over the 100 miles. 9.
I think, like I said again, central points of mass. Let's say you build a building, for example. You build it's when you build something, yeah. Say for a building, what was I saying? Like a mansion, for example. When it's not big enough, obviously, to take this effect. But let's take this for an example. The building, if it's stretched out long enough, from an outside observer that's high enough, will seem to be stretched out. Now that's because the person who's there in the first place is saying that it's central to a point of mass. So where you're standing, you'll always be relative to a central point of mass, and that's why in some places where there's more central points and there's more mass in an area, you're going to have more gravity, and in places where there's less mass, you're going to have less gravity, and vice versa, like I've already said.
Engineer W. Winkler was published in the Earth Review regarding the Earth's supposed curvature, stating, "As an engineer of many years' standing, I saw that this absurd allowance is only permitted in school books. No engineer would dream of allowing anything of the kind. I have projected many miles of railways and many..."
Railways don't mean anything. Like I said, look, here, it's on the surface. If the surface curved, you're going to stay relative to a central point of mass. So anything from the surface is going to stay relative to a flat plane because everything is say, flattened out because of the central point of mass. When you go round the Earth, you don't just fall off the edge. There's gravity that pulls you to the center. So for you, observing it doesn't mean anything on the surface. Anything that's built on the surface is relative to the Earth and its central point of mass.
more of canals, and the allowance has not even been thought of, much less allowed for. This allowance for curvature means this, that it is 8 inches for the first mile of a canal and increasing at the ratio by the square of the distance in miles. Thus a small navigable canal for boats, say 30 miles long, will have, by the above rule, an allowance for curvature of 600 feet. Think of that, and then please credit engineers as not being quite such fools. Nothing of the sort is allowed. We no more think of allowing 600 feet for a line of 30 miles of railway or canal than of wasting our time trying to square the circle. 10. The London and
Same goes for that.
North Western Railway forms a straight line 180 miles long between London and Liverpool. The railroad's highest point midway at Birmingham Station is only 240 feet above sea level. If the world were actually a globe, however, curving 8 inches per mile squared, the 180-mile stretch of rail would form an arc with the center point at Birmingham raised over a mile, a full 5...
Okay, maybe if you're going to be right at this point, yes, that's relative to the outside observer. You're going to see that curve, but relative to the observer on the surface, you're not going to experience that or observe it because the Earth has a certain. You don't. It's the same thing. It's the scale of the Earth is absolutely massive and gigantic. It really is. It's really big, and also it's all still relative to the central point of mass. When you're outside of the Earth and outside observer far enough out, you're not relative to the central point of mass. So you're going to see it is curved. But when you're actually on Earth, you're not going to see these effects or observe them.
5,400 feet above London and Liverpool. 11. A surveyor and engineer of 30 years published in the Birmingham Weekly Mercury stated, "I am thoroughly acquainted with the theory and practice of civil engineering. However bigoted some of our professors may be in the theory of surveying, according to the prescribed rules, yet it is well known amongst us that such theoretical measurements are incapable of any practical illustration."
Exactly, because you're relative to the central point of mass. It doesn't matter to anyone who's a surface observer.
All our locomotives are designed to run on what may be regarded as true levels, or flats. There are, of course, partial inclines or gradients here and there, but they are always accurately defined and must be carefully traversed. But anything approaching to 8 inches in the mile, increasing as the square of the distance, could not be worked by any engine that was ever yet constructed.
Because it doesn't matter. Let's say, for example, you've got a massive road that goes all the way across the UK, from the top of Scotland to the bottom of England. Now, there'll be a certain amount of curvature based on the equations. However, if you're in that car, Earth has a gravitational effect where you're pulled to the central point of mass. So it doesn't really matter. I think I might actually have to pull up a diagram here. I think I'll really have to pull up this for now. Sorry if this is distracting the main point here. But what I'm trying to say here is that something that's on the surface can't actually experience non-gravity, can't experience a curve because there's a thing called the core in the center of the Earth, and there's also obviously the rest of it. So let's say, for example, let's find an Earth diagram. If it will show up, that is. Okay, so it's showing up for me now. Okay. Let's take for example here. It's not very high quality, but you see here, oh, it's America, and so it's Southern and Central America here. So you have a massive road all the way along here. Now, all this mass in the center is pulling you towards the central point of mass, which is here. So, where you're going along the road, you're always relative to this. You're always relative to this central point of mass. And then when you're an outside observer, say where my mouse cursor is here, you're not relative to this. And you may be relative to this if you're in a orbiting satellite, but you're not relative to its surface. Now when you're here, this, say, road here, you'd be pulling into the center and you wouldn't experience the curve. I think that proves my point. I'm gonna make disprove just a couple
Taking
more,
one station with another
and then I'm going to make another video in a bit because I'm just gonna do some more stuff. So yeah.
all over England and Scotland, it may be stated that all the platforms are on the same relative level. The distance between
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. Let me go back to my diagram. Or diagrams. So you see here, you can see that the water here is curved. So is the land. But when you're on the surface, it pulls you towards the central point of mass. The central point of mass, for example, here will be in the center here. So as you're walking along, you're walking relative to this. When you're an outside observer, you'd be orbiting relative to this, or you're outside the Earth's gravitational influence. You wouldn't have any gravity influences at all. So you would observe this from the outside. Yeah.
eastern and western coasts of England may be set down as 300 miles. If the prescribed curvature was indeed as represented, the central stations at Rugby or Warwick ought to be close upon 3 miles higher than a chord drawn from the two extremities.
Well, they might as well be, but it doesn't matter because you're relative to the surface. It doesn't matter at all.
If such was the case, there is not a driver or stoker within the kingdom that would be found to take charge of the train. We can only laugh at those of your readers who seriously give us credit for such venturesome exploits as running trains round spherical curves. Horizontal curves on levels are dangerous enough. Vertical
Okay, so apparently, making railway tracks on a spherical Earth is a bad thing. Is it a bad thing that you can walk on a spherical Earth? Is it a bad thing that planes can fly on a spherical Earth? I mean, does it really matter as long as you're a surface relative to its central point of mass? Now, let me see if I can pull up another diagram. Maybe this diagram will be a bit different because I'm looking at central points of mass here. Earth central point of mass. Okay, let's see if we can get this. Yeah, this is the same for the gravity here. Let's still find a different one. Okay, so this is just for something else. But as you can see here, where these points come, the central point of mass here. Now, I'm walking along this straight, and there's a railway tracks along all the way this straight. Now, as you're going across, you're being pulled towards this. So as you walk along, you're not gonna walk off to some, random air that's gonna be there, are you? You're not exactly just gonna. Your train's not just gonna fly off the edge. Your train's gonna stay on because of the central point of mass. I think using these diagrams make your point seem a bit more ridiculous. I think I'm gonna keep the video at this, and I'll come back to the video in a bit. But I'm just gonna do some stuff. So yeah, thank you for watching, and we're ready for the next video.